that in your inclusion criteria. And as I mentioned yesterday, the PICOS acronym can be really helpful to help guide your inclusion criteria. So again, this is just a reference point that you can ensure that you have those key areas included in your inclusion criteria. So in this box here, 2.2 eligibility criteria, I have taken this from the systematic review that I spoke about earlier that was led by Mehmet. So in that review where we were looking at university students' statistic self-concept and how it could be enhanced and determined, that was our aim and research question, we implemented the following eligibility criteria. So for the year of publication, we had put that studies must be published between 1970 and 2019, March 2019 to be specific. And this was to ensure that we were inclusive of all literature that looked at statistic self-concept. And the latter date there, the 26th of the 3rd, 2019, refers to the date that the literature was screened. Okay, so that's the date that the search strategy was implemented. So that's when the databases were searched and that's when the results were screened. So that's how we came up with that date. So in this systematic review, we're very inclusive of the year of publication, okay? In other systematic reviews, you could have maybe a date range of only 10 years, but again, you can be very inclusive like this systematic review has been. Then for publication status, we included both peer-reviewed articles and also grey literature. So we were very inclusive of the publication status. And second point there, B, to ensure all studies are eligible for full text screening and synthesis, full text must be accessible. So our publication status was, it didn't matter whether a study was peer-reviewed in an article or in a journal, or if it was grey literature. The only inclusion criteria that we had in relation to publication status was to ensure that we could access full text of the article or the paper. And that was to ensure that we could screen at full text and that it could be included in the synthesis. Because if we can't access the full text, then we can't extract data from that study and it can't be included in the systematic review. In relation to context, again, we were inclusive of all context, so we weren't looking at a specific geographical context or a country or a region within a country, so we didn't include anything to do with context. You can also see point C, that we stated that the studies must be written in English, and that was due to the language proficiency of the authors. Okay, so if you are fluent and you can understand and read in more than one language, then that's great, and you can state that in your criteria that you are happy to have maybe studies in different languages because you can understand them. But for this example, we only included studies in English. Then for point D, we have, as a key concept, statistic self-concept must be determined to ensure all eligible studies are included and the review accurately synthesizes studies accordingly. So that is our outcome measure. Okay, statistic self-concept was the outcome measure that we were interested in, and it must have been determined, so that means it must have been defined in the literature to ensure that we could accurately synthesize the studies so that we were clear that every study was looking at the same thing. And if they had a different definition of statistic self-concept, we could highlight that in the review. And then point E refers to our population of interest. So as a key concept, participants must be university or college students. So again, that's population. So it's very important to state who the population is. So when you are looking at screening the literature, you can understand whether a study is eligible or not based on the population. And then in relation to the study design, point F here under 2.2 is where we looked at that. So if statistic self-concept scales are used, the relevant statistical data for statistic self-concept must be reported, such as Cronbach's alpha values, to ensure the internal consistency of presented scales can be measured. So we've clearly highlighted here the type of statistical data that we need studies to report in order for them to be eligible for this systematic review. And again, that's really important because then when you go to screen the literature, if these studies don't include certain statistics, then they are not eligible. So it's very clear which to include and which to exclude. So this is just an example, again, taken from the systematic review of some eligibility criteria. The eligibility criteria, or the inclusion criteria, it can also be known as, will vary according to each systematic review and each study. Okay, it doesn't have to be in this particular order that we have put it in here from A to F. It can be in any order, and it's going to be unique for the systematic review that you're conducting. Okay, but these factors to consider are just some examples of what you can think about when you're thinking about what type of studies do I want to include, which do I want to exclude. And you can see here how then in practice you can say, okay, year of publication, this is what I'm going to look at, or this is the population I'm interested in, and this is how you would write it in an inclusion criteria. But just always remember that PICO or PICOs can just help to streamline your thoughts and what is important to think about. So step 3 then, we have formulated our research question, which is looking to measure and enhance statistic self-concept amongst university students. And we have just come up with our inclusion criteria that we're interested in that has really went along the lines of PICOs, okay? So we have those 2 major components of the systematic review conducted. And now we move on to step 3, which is also particularly important because this will determine the type of studies that get returned to you that you have to screen. So step 3 is develop a search string and strategy. So it's really important that you take your time when you're developing a search string to ensure you make the most effective search string that you can to try and get all the relevant studies in your searches. And as I said yesterday, you can feel free to play around with your search string before you commit to the final one. And you can just talk about that in your review if you write it up, about what type of search strings you tried, what concepts in your search string did you try, and why did you then go for your final one. So just as a reminder, the search string, it simply refers to all relevant terms that link to your Sorry, I think I got muted there. So I'm not sure if you heard that. So just as a reminder, a search string simply refers to all relevant terms that link to your formulated research question. So a search string might sound complicated, but it's simply just the terms that you're going to use to search the literature databases to try and get some results back of studies that might be eligible for your systematic review. So in the systematic review on statistic self-concept that was led by Mehmet, you can see here, this is an abstract from the review, and we have key concepts and search strings. So this is where we refer to our search string and we kind of justify how we have got to that search string. So you can see here that it is stated that the key concepts for this systematic review were identified as university students and statistic self-concept. And that was based on the participants and outcomes components of the PICO framework. Okay, so the participants for this systematic review were university students, and the outcome component of this systematic review was statistic self-concept. So there were 2 major components that had to be included in our search string. But we also thought about those key concepts and their synonyms, okay, to determine maybe how could we have a more inclusive search string to ensure that we are not going to miss out on any studies that have looked at statistic self-concept amongst university students, but maybe use different terms, okay? So we know depending on the geographical context that universities can be referred to as university or college, okay, or just courses at third level. So you have to think about all of that if you are looking to be broad in the geographical context that you're looking at. So as I mentioned previously, this systematic review was inclusive of all regions, okay, so all countries. It did not look specifically at a country. So we had to think then, what else is university known as across the globe? So because of this, we determined that student, course, college, university, statistics self-concept, and cognitive competence were key concepts that should be included in our systematic review. So student, course, college, and university all really refer to our population, okay? And then the outcome refers to statistic self-concept, but that can also be known as cognitive competence. And that's why we included those two. So this search string just tried to be inclusive of the two areas, so the two key concepts that we were interested in, and use some other terms that may also catch relevant studies. So you can see here in the box that the search string that was implemented for this systematic review was student and course or college or university, and statistics self-concept or cognitive competence. So if you remember yesterday when I was talking about search strings, I spoke about and or. So just to refresh your memory in relation to this example, this refers to that we want student and either of the following concepts to be included in a study: course or college or university. So student must be there along with either course, college or university, okay? And in relation to, or in addition to, sorry, student and one of these three concepts relating to university, we want either statistic self-concept or cognitive competence to be included too. Okay, so if you remember the or operator, it means that we are happy for one of these concepts to be included in the study that is returned to us when we screen the literature. Okay, so that could be course or college or university. It doesn't have to be all three, it can just be one of them. Okay, but we really want student and either one of these and one of statistics self-concept or cognitive competence. Okay, so that's where your operators are very important because they can determine, where is the flexibility in your search string. Okay, so your or gives you a bit of flexibility that it doesn't have to particularly be this concept, but can it be one of these? And the and means yes, this definitely has to be there along with whatever other concept. Okay. So you can see that the search string isn't particularly long. Again, you can play around if you're conducting a systematic review and include different concepts to see which are most effective for your own research question, and then you can implement the one that you think is most effective. So step 4 then, after we have got our research question, our inclusion criteria, and our search string, we then think, okay, let's write up our protocol. So our protocol includes information on literature, intervention, outcome measures, research questions, methodology, data collection and analysis, and data synthesis. Okay, so as I said yesterday, a protocol is simply a reference guide for your systematic review. And it means that once you have done these preliminary stages, so steps 1 to 3, you can write up your protocol. And what it means is if somebody else outside of your research team or outside of your systematic review picked up this protocol, they would understand every step that you are going through to conduct your systematic review, okay? And if they wanted to implement the same systematic review, they could follow every step that you have included in this protocol and they would get the same type of results, okay? So it's really to ensure that your methods are transparent and to reduce any author bias that might occur at later stages of the systematic review. So I haven't included the protocol of systematic review article that I'm talking about today, as it wasn't published. But when the protocol is put together, it's a very good way to reflect on, is this really answering the research question that I'm interested in? Am I being inclusive of the literature? And do I understand the steps that I now have to go through to conduct the systematic review? Okay, so it's just a reference guide. And as I said, if somebody else picked it up, the purpose is that they could conduct the systematic review following your steps in the protocol. So once you have put together all those steps, then we want to conduct our search strategy or our literature search. And to do this, we want to use the search string that we have put together. Okay, so that's what I just spoke about. And we want to then select databases, so some literature databases, to screen for relevant papers. So there are many different literature databases out there that you can screen for the literature, both that are education specific and also wider social science databases out there. And if you're not sure, you can speak to maybe your subject librarian, who will have lots of information about the different databases that you could screen. And there is also some well-known ones within the field. So for example, with education, we have ERIC, Scopus, Web of Knowledge, and PsycInfo. They're all quite big ones. And social science also have big ones. So there's a bit of overlap. So we have Scopus, we have the Social Science Citation Index as well. So there are a range of different ones. And you can decide within your systematic review, which ones do you want to search, okay, which ones, and you don't have to search them all, as long as you search a good range of databases that you think will be inclusive of the literature and will hopefully catch all the relevant studies that are eligible for your systematic review. So as an example then, from the systematic review that was conducted, it was stated that this systematic review searched education-specific databases, so that refers to ERIC, PsycInfo and PsycArticles, and wider academic databases, such as Web of Science and Scopus. Okay, so this systematic review was inclusive of both education-specific databases and also wider academic databases. So that means that studies that weren't specific to education, maybe they were more social sciences, they would have also been included in the screening of the literature. Okay, so it's important that you take the time, along with developing your search string, to think about the different databases that you can search, because that is going to determine the different studies that are returned to you that you have to screen. So if you're unsure, again, you can play around along with your search string, play around with the different databases, okay, and then you can refine down from there. You don't just have to choose the ones that you decide that you're going to search in the first instance. Okay, so it can be a process of elimination. Maybe you put your search string into one and you get no results, maybe like 5 results, and you're like, oh, this isn't going to work. So then you can eliminate that one. Okay, it's all just about being transparent in your methods. So it just means that if you're writing this up, you can discuss how you tried different databases and why you have decided to go with these final ones. So for example, there is 5 included in the systematic review by Phyllis et al. And why did we choose those 5? Okay, so maybe they were the most effective, maybe they included the most hits that were relevant when we done preliminary searches. So you can just discuss that in your systematic review and justify why you've come up with this um, final lot of databases to search. So within the databases that were searched here, there was also the choice of including grey literature. So I'm going to go into this in more detail in a few slides, but some of the databases, as I said yesterday, have internal filters that you can use. Okay, so you can clearly highlight if you want only journal articles, books, reports, and that's a really good way to try and include grey literature. If these databases that you have chosen include internal filters and you keep them that you want to see all different outputs, then that's inclusive of grey literature if it's included in the database. So in this systematic review of the databases that were included, there was an element of grey literature included in the systematic review. So again, that's just something to think about. And there are also different databases that you can search, particularly for grey literature. So just remember, grey literature is, dissertations, theses, reports, and things like that there that aren't journal articles. So, for example, a grey literature database that you could search is ProQuest, dissertations, and theses. Okay, so if you put your search string into ProQuest, dissertations, and theses, that will bring up all the different PhD theses, master's dissertations, maybe undergrad dissertations if they have been conducted and uploaded on your relevant topic area. And then you can then go through those and screen them along with the other academic databases that you have included. And grey literature databases are a very good source of information because if you think about dissertations and PhD theses, a lot of work goes into them. So for a master's, it might be 1 year, and for a PhD, it can be at least 3 years. So a lot of work goes into those, and there's a lot of rich data included in them. And maybe the authors just haven't got around to publishing their academic journal articles yet. So it's a very good way to be on top of the literature within your field if you include grey literature. So it's just something to think about. And again, if there's any questions about it later on, I'm more than happy to talk more about it if it's helpful in any way. So that is our search string and our search strategy, so the databases that we have included in our systematic review. And then what we do is we put our search string into those databases and we press search or we press run, and then that brings up all of our results that we need to screen. So that leads us on to step 6, screen the results. So as a reminder, as I know I threw a lot of information yesterday at you with all the different steps, screening the results really refers to screening results at 2 levels. So once we implement our search strategy, okay, so a search strategy simply refers to picking our databases that we want to search and implementing the search string, okay, so putting our search string into the databases and hitting search, and then seeing all the results that come up. When we screen all results, we have to do it at 2 levels. The first one is at title and abstract, which we do for all results that are returned to us from the search. So that's level 1 screening. And then we do level 2 screening. So for those that we have screened at title and abstract, and we think they are eligible for our systematic review, We then conduct a second level of screening, which is level 2, and that's in text. So that means that all studies that are returned to us from our search are screened at title and abstract, and then only those that we think are eligible based on their title and abstract are screened in text. So in-text screening simply means that we read through the articles and we look at all the different information that they include, and we determine whether they are eligible or not eligible based on our inclusion and exclusion criteria. Okay, and title and abstract simply means that you read the title and the abstract of all the studies, and based on that information, you determine whether you think they may be eligible and you want to include them for in-text screening. So screening results, 2 levels, level 1, title and abstract, and then level 2 for what you think are eligible studies, and that's in-text screening. So, as the examples from Phyllis et al., you can see that it is stated that the study identification process began with implementing the above search string. So that is the search string that I provided a couple of slides ago in the aforementioned databases. So that's the databases, the 5 databases that I just discussed. Okay, so ERIC, PsycInfo, PsycArticles, I think Web of Knowledge and Scopus. Okay, so that were the databases. So once we put that search string into those databases and we press search, the search returned a total of 257 entries. Okay, so that was the total number of articles that were returned to us after we implemented our search strategy. These studies were then imported into Zotero software. So Zotero software is a reference managing system, which allowed us to import them all there, and then it allowed us to screen them based on their title and abstract. Okay, so that meant we could include and exclude very easily. All the studies were in one place. And it also meant if there was duplication of studies, so for example, if we searched one database and then we searched the next database and the same study came up twice, that's a duplication. So we can remove the duplicates straight away, okay, before we start our screening, because there is no point in including the same study twice, because it's just more work for yourself. So once we imported the studies into Zotero, and once we've done that and the duplicate entries were removed, this left a total of 217 studies to be screened at title and abstract. Okay, so that means that there was a total of 40 duplicate articles across the different databases that were searched. So that left 217 studies to be screened by 2 authors. So this paragraph simply means that the search string was implemented. Okay, so the search string was put into the different databases, the 5 databases I just spoke about. It was pressed searched. When the search was then returned, all of the results were put into Zotero software, and there's different ones that you can use. Rev Manager is another software that is very like Zotero that manages your references, and there's lots of information on these online manuals and how to use them. So if you Google Zotero or RevMan, it will come up and you can download them onto your computer. So yep, as I was saying, that left 257 and they were imported into the software, so it was easy to screen them. And from this, then we removed any duplicate entries. So any study that was in the software twice, okay, because we only needed it once to screen. And that left 217 studies to be screened at title and abstract. So 2 reviewers screened at title and abstract. And if you remember from yesterday, I said that it's important if you can get another person to help screen, because it tries to reduce the error and bias likelihood of your systematic review. So it just means that you have a second opinion on your your own decisions of whether a study should be included and excluded. And then that allows you to reduce any likelihood of bias and error that may occur. Not that you mean to be, it just is part of the process. So in this review, once the 217 studies were screened by 2 authors at title and abstract, the following results then were apparent. So this is the second paragraph. We had 131 studies eliminated by their titles and 51 were eliminated by their abstracts, okay? So in total, that meant 182 studies were excluded on title and abstract screening, okay? So 182 studies based on the 217 that were screened were excluded due to their title and abstract not being relevant to the systematic review. And we knew they weren't relevant to the systematic review because we used our inclusion and exclusion criteria for the review. So that then really highlights the importance of having a very clear and detailed eligibility or inclusion criteria, because then it means when you go to screen a title and abstract and also in text, you're very clear of what studies will be eligible and which won't. So in this review, once the inclusion criteria was used at title and abstract, 182 studies were excluded from the review. And then this left 35 studies to be examined against the eligibility criteria for full text screening. Okay, so full text screening, as I have said, refers to reading the different papers or the different reports or dissertations, reading them in text, and then using the inclusion criteria and saying, does this study meet our inclusion criteria? Is there anything missing that it should be excluded? And then you make your decision there. And again, if you can get a second reviewer to help you with this, to kind of validate your decisions, to reduce any likelihood of bias and error, that is really important too. So in this study, once full text screening was conducted, this eliminated 14 studies. Okay, so 14 studies did not meet the inclusion criteria when we looked in text. And that resulted in 21 studies being included in the review. Okay. So this just shows the different processes that we go through to screen results. So we started at title and abstract. Okay. We removed our duplicates and then we looked at our title and abstract screening against the inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then based off the studies that were included based on title and abstract, we then screened them in text against inclusion criteria. And then that left us with the final number of studies to be included in our systematic review. And in this case, that resulted in 21 studies. So quite a good number. So as I have said on the previous slide, if more than one reviewer can be involved in the screening process, it is quite important, and this is to reduce the risk of bias and error. It also means if there are any disagreements, so for example, you may decide that a study should be included for in-text screening, and your second reviewer thinks it should be excluded, it means that you can discuss these disagreements until an agreement or a consensus has been reached between you. Okay, so that's really just to reduce any likelihood of the bias and error occurring in your systematic review. And it also shows that there is further transparency in your methods. So systematic reviews are all about transparency and ensuring that it's very clear what methods you have used and how you have got to this stage. So if more than one reviewer can be included in your systematic review screening, this is quite important. And then what you can do, if there are two of you screening the literature, you can calculate Cohen's kappa to provide an inter-reader reliability between reviewers. So Cohen's kappa is simply a statistic that provides the level of agreement between the different reviewers. okay? So it ranges from 0 to 1. So 0 refers to absolutely no agreement between the reviewers, okay? You didn't agree on one thing. And the number 1 then refers to absolute agreement. So there were no disagreements whatsoever. So usually you find that Cohen's kappa is between around 0.7 and 0.9 because there's always going to be some disagreements between reviewers, which is fine as long as you discuss those disagreements and come to a consensus. And what you can do then to calculate Cohen's kappa is you can make note of the number of disagreements that there were between the reviewers. So say, for example, it was 3 out of 21, okay? And then those are the statistics that you use to calculate Cohen's kappa. And again, there's lots of information online on how to calculate Cohen's kappa for systematic reviews. So once you have screened the literature searches at title and abstract level and then in text, and we have got a second reviewer to validate our decisions, and we have discussed any disagreements that may come up, we can then put together a Prisma flow diagram. And this is really to illustrate the systematic synthesizing of the literature. Okay, so these are common practice within systematic reviews to include, as it is an illustration of the systematic process that we have used to synthesize the literature to our final number of studies that are included in the systematic review. And I have an example of one that I'm going to talk through in the next slide. So this is an example taken from Phyllis et al. And the Prisma flow diagram that was used. So it might look a bit scary, but don't worry, I'm going to talk through it. So we start from the top, and you can see here that it states the education-specific databases that were searched and the wider scope databases. So that simply refers to the databases that we searched for the literature, okay, that we then screened. So you'll remember that I said that we searched 5 different databases. 3 of those were education specific, and 2 of those were wider scoped databases. Okay, so from the education specific databases, we had ERIC, PsycInfo, and PsycArticles, and the wider scope databases were Web of Knowledge and Scopus. So we have simply stated what these databases were, okay, in each box. And then underneath, we have the N number. So the N number simply refers to the number of results that were returned from our screening in each database, okay? So that means that in ERIC, the total number of search results that were returned to us when we put the search strategy into ERIC was 27 studies. Okay, and then with PsycInfo, the total number of search results returned was 18. It was much bigger in PsycArticles with 114. And then with the wider scope databases, Web of Science returned 40 results when we implemented the search string. So when we put our search string into Web of Science database, we got 40 results back. And with Scopus, we got 58. Okay, so if we added up all these numbers, it would give us our total number of 247. Okay, so that is simply the top line. It is the databases that we used, and when we implemented our search string, what was the total number that we got back? What were the hits? Okay. This second box down here, records after duplicates were removed, simply means once we got all the results from the different databases, and as the example I provided, we input them into Zotero, okay, to manage our references. Once we had all of our results returned from the databases and we removed any duplicates, so that simply means that one study was returned to us more than once. Okay, so in our results, it might have been there 2 or 3 times. So we only kept it once and we removed any of the other duplicates. Once we'd done that, the total number of records that we had to screen at title and abstract were 217 studies. Okay, and then that leaves us with the records screened at title and abstract to be 217. And then this little box that is an orange colour to the right-hand side tells us the records that were excluded by title and abstract. Okay, so it's going into the detail to tell the reader where did we exclude studies and why did we exclude them. So at this level, records were excluded by title and abstract. So there was a total of 131 studies that were excluded due to their title not being relevant to the systematic review, and there was 51 excluded due to the abstract not being eligible for the systematic review. So sometimes when you do a search, some of the results that are returned are really not relevant. So for example, if you're doing one in education or social sciences, it might return one that is to do with medicine, and it's absolutely nothing to do with what you're looking at. So based on that title, you know that you can completely disregard it. So that's how we can disregard it, title. And then abstract, it gives us a bit more detail. So this level, the records screened, N equals 217, refers to records screened at title and abstract. And then this little box to the right-hand side of it tells us how did we exclude studies at this level. This then lets us go down to full text articles assessed for eligibility, and that was a total of 35. So once we took 131 and 51 studies away from this 217 that were screened at title and abstract, it left us a total of 35 studies to be included for in-text screening. Okay, so that was level 2 screening, the in-text screening. And again, we used our inclusion and exclusion criteria here to see which would be eligible for inclusion in systematic review. And the second orange box tells us why studies were excluded at level 2 screening. So why did we exclude studies based on their in-text screening? So you can see that a total of 6 studies were excluded because the full text was not accessible. So as I said earlier, it's important that we can access the full text of studies because it allows us to do the in-text screening, okay, and screen their information, their paper through the eligibility criteria. But we couldn't access 6 full texts, so they were excluded from the systematic review. 3 studies were not written in English. So because the language proficiency, of the authors was only English, if it wasn't written in English, we couldn't read and screen it. So we had to exclude 3 at that level. Statistics self-concept was not determined in 2 studies. So if you remember with the eligibility criteria, it was stated that they must define statistics self-concept because that was our outcome measure of interest. So we needed to understand how each study defined the outcome measure, okay? And for 2 studies, they did not determine how statistics self-concept was defined. So this meant they were excluded from the systematic review. Then in relation to population, university or college students did not participate. All studies had university or college students, so we didn't have to exclude any based on that. And then the final one, the statistical data for statistics self-concept were not reported, was evident in 3 studies. So again, if you remember back to the eligibility criteria that I discussed earlier in the presentation, you will remember in relation to study design, it was very clearly stated what statistics the eligible studies should include in their paper in order to be eligible for the systematic review. And in this case, it was the example of Cronbach's alpha needed to be provided, or other statistics that would allow that to be calculated. But 3 studies of the 35 that were screened in text did not provide the statistical data and so they were excluded. So once we put together all the records that were excluded at in-text screening, this left us a total of 21 studies to be included in the qualitative synthesis. Okay, so this final box down here refers to the final number of studies that were included in our systematic review. And again, there is lots of information in relation to Prisma flow diagrams and what to include in each box. Okay, there's a template out there, so don't panic if you think after this presentation you're going to remember about Prisma flow diagrams, but you can't remember what you put in each box. That's okay, don't worry. There's information out there. Again, if you just put into your search engine Prisma flow diagram systematic review, it will come up with the templates. So this is just a way to illustrate the systematic synthesis that we have went through to get the final number of studies for our systematic review. Okay? And then that leads us to step 7. So once we have implemented our search strategy and we have screened the results of the literature, it means that we have all studies that are eligible for the systematic review, and it means that we can start to extract relevant data. Okay, so we have 21 studies, for example, in this systematic review sitting, that we can now extract data for because they're eligible for inclusion in the systematic review. So data extraction sounds really scary, but it's not. It simply refers to pulling out the relevant information for eligible studies. And it is usually assisted with an extraction form, which aligns with the inclusion criteria of the review. Okay, so you can just put together a data extraction form in Excel, for example, and down the left-hand side, you have all the key information that you need to include, and then it allows you to write in the other cells what this information in the studies are. So, for example, this is an example from a systematic review that I am currently involved in. So it can be tweaked according to the you're interested in. What you can see, this was done in Microsoft Excel, and you can see that it follows loosely the PICO's statement. So we have population, intervention, comparison, outcome, and then we have study design and study context, and maybe any other details of note that we should include. So for example, in the population, we're interested in the number of participants that there are, okay, the age of them, if that's applicable to your systematic review, any other characteristics we should know about them. So for example, was it only girls included? Was there an even mix of girls and boys included? Is that important for your systematic review? Okay, so we just have information about the population. Who is the sample in the study? Then we have the intervention. So if you have an intervention that you're interested in, this is when you can look into that. So in this example, it's educational maths apps that are used on tablets or smartphones. Okay, if you don't have that, that's okay. Then we have comparison. So what are you comparing the outcome against? So again, for example, this is to do with randomized control trials. So if they're the control group, then we can include information here. But equally, you might be comparing against demographic information. So for example, the differences between girls and boys in attainment or in statistic self-concept, something like that. You can include the comparator factors that you're interested in under comparison. Then you have outcome. So what is the outcome that you're interested in? Okay, so in this example, it is statistic self-concept, but in other examples, it could be attainment, attainment in a particular subject or overall attainment. But in the example that we're looking at by Phyllis et al., it is statistic self-concept. So that would be the outcome. And we can include information about the outcome measure that a study has included. So for example, is it a reliable measure? So that would mean, is it a standardized measure of the outcome, or has the author developed and created their own outcome measure of statistic self-concept? Okay, because that can kind of differ with the quality and the sensitivity of it. Then we have study design. So if you remember, study design refers to if it's quantitative or qualitative. Maybe you're including both, that's okay. And then you want to talk about the particular methods that a study has used. So for example, if it's quantitative, is it randomized controlled trial? Is it experimental, observation? Okay, that all comes under study design. Then we've also included study context. So as I said previously, that can refer to the country, okay, country location, and also settings within that country. So for example, is it in a university? Is it in a high school or elementary school, or is it kindergarten, preschool? You can include that in the study context if that differs for each study. And then down at the bottom, we have other details of note. So that's just anything else that the authors may highlight that you think are important. So for example, they might talk about some limitations of their study that you think are very important for determining the quality of their own research or their own paper. And you can include that in your details of note, because then it means when you go back to your notes, you'll be like, yes, this was a good study, but it had these limitations, or the authors also pointed this out. Okay, so this data extraction form is a simple example of one, but as I said, it'll differ depending on what you're interested in. But you can use PICOs to help structure your data extraction form. And again, there's lots of information on what type of data to extract online if you're stuck. And a data extraction form, so this was done in Microsoft Excel. And one data extraction form should be completed for each study that you have included in your systematic review. So in the example of the Phyllis et al., we will have 21 of these sheets, okay? 21, so one for each study that was included in the systematic review. So that means when we go to write up our synthesis, we will have 21 sheets of these that we can refer to that tell us about the population, intervention, comparison, outcome, and study design of each study that we have included. Okay, so that is our data extraction, a very simple way to do it. It also keeps it very clear and neat, and it also then allows you to see if there's any missing information in a study that you could then contact the author about. So for example, if they haven't actually stated the number of children included in the population of their study, you could then email them and say, I'm conducting a systematic review, I'm really interested in your study, but you haven't told me the sample. Can you please give me this really important information so I can include it? And hopefully they would reply. So that's your data extraction, which can be quite a lengthy process depending on how many studies you have for inclusion. Okay. So once we have extracted the data, this then allows us to assess the methodological and overall quality of included studies. So if I go back to I'm going too far, I'm going the wrong way. If I go back to the data extraction form, in the other details of note, okay, you could include information about how rigorous you think the study has been. Okay, so that's your own thoughts, your own critical evaluation of the study, because you are keeping them separate from the information that has been included in the study itself through the other parts of the data extraction form. So step 8 then simply refers to identifying any potential biases or inaccuracies within studies whilst helping to interpret the data in its practical or theoretical context. Okay, so that means you can critically evaluate studies and determine their methodological and overall quality. So that simply means assess the methods that they used. Were they accurate? Were they the best robust methods to use for that study? And what do you think of the overall quality Do you think it was a very high quality paper, or do you think there were some limitations? And a good way to think about it is think about the practical or theoretical context of which the study is situated in. Okay, so if you have a theory that is maybe driving your systematic review, think about the quality of the study in relation to that theoretical context or that theoretical framework. In addition, you can think about the study and its quality in relation to a practical context. So, an example, as I said earlier, if you are looking at the effectiveness of a particular policy in education or social sciences, that could be a practical context that you kind of assess the quality of a study against. Okay, so this extract is taken again from Phyllis et al. And it just highlights how the authors of this systematic review address step 8. So, how they really highlighted that they assessed the methodological and overall quality of the included studies. So, you can see that it states that the results of the studies are subject to selection bias and ascertainment bias. Okay, so it's highlighted that there are bias evident within the studies that are included in the systematic review. And then it highlights how studies could overcome these bias. Okay, so the authors highlight here that if different methods were used, so for example, random allocation of participants to different groups, again, this refers to randomized controlled trials, this could help reduce any bias and it could improve the overall quality of studies. Then you can also highlight some limitations of that recommendation, so that participants could be aware of group assignment, which might affect their motivation to learn, which could affect the results of the study. So it really highlights that here is the problem with the studies, okay, here is some bias that occurs, here are the limitations, here's how we could overcome them, okay, so a recommendation, but also critically evaluate its own recommendation. So this extract really highlights the data in the practical context, okay, and also the methodological context. How can we overcome the limitations through the methods that are used? So you can really assess the overall quality of studies as you extract the data, okay? Because that's probably a good way to do it. Once you've read through and you've extracted the data and you are familiar with the paper that you're looking at, then you can take some time to critically reflect on it and assess the overall quality. Okay, so it's just a continuation of your data extraction, only it's your own critical thinking that you include. That then leads to step 9. So that's a synthesis of studies. And the purpose of that is to combine the results across studies, testing for any differences in results between studies to provide a summary of the findings. Okay, so using our data extraction form, all that information that we have extracted allows us to conduct step 9, which is the synthesis of studies. Okay, so that is simply pulling together all the different information that we have included in our data extraction form and starting to combine the results. What are the patterns? What are the trends that we are seeing? What are the differences? So an example from Phyllis et al., it simply states to introduce the synthesis of studies that the above section examined the impact of different teaching methods on improving statistic self-concept. The reported effect sizes of the eligible studies range from small to large, highlighting variation in the impact of teaching methods on student statistic self-concepts and outcomes. So it's very clear through this little extract from the systematic review that they have summarised this synthesis of studies. So they have summarised by pulling together all of the results. What are some of the key areas that should be highlighted? So it states that the effect sizes of the studies range from small to large. And then it highlights that this really reflects variation in the impact of teaching methods on students' statistics, self-concept and outcomes. Okay, so those type of summary sentences and little paragraphs can be very important just to pull together the different results from studies. So when you synthesize studies, there are various ways that you can do it, which I'm going to highlight, but you can also think about integrating results from numerous studies by thinking about any variation that occurs in the following. So it's your population, your intervention, outcome, methods, your context and your settings, and your study design. So I highlighted that yesterday in the presentation. So this abstract again from Phyllis et al. Highlights how they have pulled together different studies and the results of different studies to provide a synthesis of the research. So you can see in blue, it refers to different studies that were eligible for the systematic review. And they simply state, okay, what each study has reported or what each study has found very briefly, and then they move on to the next study and they try to pull it together. Okay, so they try to do it in a coherent way. So they start with one in a particular geographical context. So, for example, it's in the USA and it uses a particular teaching method. But then it moves on to say that another study that was conducted in a different country actually had a lower effect. Okay, and then we move on to a different one, which is in more different context, and it has a different teaching method, and it highlights differences in effect sizes as well. So it's merely trying to merge together the different results of studies, okay, that use maybe the same population. So the population is consistent of university students, but there's variation in the methods, the teaching methods that are used, and that then relates to the differences in the outcomes that we see. So these are all clearly stated. And it really just provides a summary of the research evidence and then allows us to draw upon the conclusiveness of the results to the population and some limitations that there are. Okay, so this is just an example of how you can present your results. Of course, it will depend on your own systematic review and how many studies that you've included and what the topic area is for what the best way to do that is. So when you're presenting the results, think of these key areas to report. So we have effects of interventions on outcomes. We have the summary of results. So that's what I have just shown. We have evidence quality. So that refers to your overall evaluation of the studies that are included. Any bias that you think has occurred. So again, that refers to the overall evaluation. Limitations of the studies that you have included in the systematic review, and also limitations of your own systematic review. Okay, if you critically evaluate the review you have conducted, are there any limitations there? And if possible, try and link the key findings of the systematic review to your theoretical framework, the policy framework or policy context of the country that you're looking at, and practice as well. Okay, so try and think about the results of these studies and try and think more broadly, okay, where are they situated within theoretical or policy and practice framework. And there are multiple ways that you can present your results, okay? So of course we need to write about them in our paragraphs, in our discussion, on our results section, but we can structure these according to the research question or area of focus of our systematic review. So if you remember back to the research question of the systematic review by Phyllis et al., it was how can statistics self-concept of university students be improved and how can it be measured? So what this systematic review has done when it's writing up its results, it has put together two different sections. So firstly, it's the bottom one, is how can statistics self-concept be measured? Okay, and then the second one is how can statistics self-concept be improved? So it is disaggregating the information about the measurement of our concept of interest or measurement of the outcome. And then it's thinking separately about how can that outcome be improved. Okay, so it's just a very clear way to present the results of studies. But in addition to providing the discussions around the results, okay, in paragraphs, we can also provide a summary table. And this is an extract from the big summary table that's included in Phyllis et al. So it simply provides a summary of the findings from the included studies. So for example, we have the author, so the author's name, who are the participants of the studies? Okay, so give us who they were, the number of them, what context were they in? Were they in a different country? Was there an intervention that was included in the paper? Was there any comparisons? Okay, so is there any comparators that the outcome was measured against? And what was the outcome? Okay, so what outcome measure was used and what were those results? So you can see that it'll vary according to each study. So for example, this first study didn't have an intervention and didn't have a comparison, whereas the second study did. So, that's a way to evaluate the overall quality of studies as well. When you have a table like this, it's very clear to see what information is missing from some studies. So this is just an example of a way to present the results in addition to your discussion and results sections. And you can see that this paper also in its summary table uses the PICO's framework for participants intervention, comparison and outcome to structure its table. So it's just extracting all that key information again. But there are other ways too that you can present the results. So for example, you could provide graphs. So this, I'll go for the bar chart first. This bar chart looks at the effect sizes of different teaching approaches and their effects on statistic self-concept of university students. So you can see that they range, and this is a good way to illustrate variation in studies and the outcome measures they have used. And this pie chart, figure 3, highlights the different outcome measures that were used to measure statistic self-concept. Okay, so there were 3 different measures used in studies, and this pie chart simply illustrates that and the number of studies that use each scale. So it's just thinking about, in addition to writing up your results and discussion sections, how else can we illustrate the data most effectively for the reader to understand the data that we have synthesized, okay? So when you have presented your results, okay, so you've written up your results section and your discussion and you've maybe included a table or a graph, you can also think about the ability of the systematic review to highlight some of these areas as well, to kind of conclude the systematic review. So when we're moving forward, once we've synthesized this evidence and we move forward, so what was the point in doing the systematic review? So you can highlight any remaining gaps within the field, okay? So give future research a direction if it's possible. So maybe you've synthesized the research evidence within a field, but there's still gaps. So maybe they haven't examined, why does this happen or how does this happen? And that could be an area for future research direction. So think critically about the evidence synthesis that you have conducted and what are any gaps that still exist. So then also think about recommendations for future research practice. Okay, so not just future research topics, but also future research practice. So that could be in relation to methodology or topic. So if you remember one of the extracts that I provided by Phyllis et al., they really recommended that future research practice included randomized control trials to reduce the bias and error of studies. So, think critically about that. And also think more broadly. So, outside of the research context, are there any recommendations that you can provide based on your evidence synthesis for policy and practice within the field? And these are examples of how you can put these different recommendations into your systematic review. So Phyllis et al. Provided recommendations for future research, recommendations for practitioners, and recommendations for researchers. So you can see, starting from the left-hand side, recommendations for future research was that the effects of computer applications that provide teacher and peer feedback on statistic self-concept can be examined using randomized controlled trials. There was also the recommendation for future research to change the scale that was used to measure statistic self-concept to include students' attitudes towards learning statistics through technology. Okay, so there's two key recommendations provided by the authors for future research. Then recommendations for practitioners were also provided. So in this instance, that would be teachers or more specifically, university lecturers. So it's clear here that it says by the authors, greater research with methodologically robust designs is needed on these approaches to determine their effects of student statistic self-concept in higher education institutions. And then finally, the authors provide recommendations for researchers. Okay, so it clearly highlights that there is a need for more studies to provide randomized controlled trials and also providing some information on pre and post test designs, which is part of a randomized controlled trial. So this study has not only presented the results of the evidence synthesis, okay, so of all the eligible studies included in the systematic review, it is also then taken a step back and critically evaluated what does this evidence synthesis mean for future research practitioners and researchers, and where do we go from here, okay? So once we have conducted all of those steps, that really leaves us with our final systematic review. But I just wanted to go back over the general recommendations that I did highlight yesterday. But I think they're quite important to remember if you're conducting a systematic review. So firstly, develop a refined research question, okay? Have your concepts that are clear and make sure that your research question is manageable within the time frame that you have. So don't give a question that is very wide and broad if you only have, 2 months to conduct it. Think about what you want to look at and keep it refined. As I've highlighted throughout the systematic review seminar, the more detailed the inclusion criteria of your systematic review, the easier it will be to search the literature in a clear and efficient manner. And it will also reduce chances of error and bias in your systematic review. And this is really highlighted in the Prisma flow diagram that I provided, okay? So the more detailed your inclusion criteria, the easier it's going to be to get through those stages of screening and the reasons why you have excluded studies. And it's difficult to come up with a search string, okay? You don't know whether to keep it short or to go longer or what to include. So conduct preliminary searches with different search strings to determine which is most effective. And you can just discuss that in your systematic review, why you've done that and justify why you have come up with the final search string. And as I've said before, if there is some information that is missing from a study that you think would be eligible for your systematic review, contact the authors and ask questions or ask for clarifications. And again, you can discuss this in your review because it will not only provide justifications for your inclusion or exclusion of studies, but it will also enhance the transparency of your methods. Ensure that you have clear conceptual definitions, okay, because again, that will make it easier to screen the literature. And if you need guidance on databases or search terms, speak to the subject librarian at your university. And if you can, include grey literature to overcome search, selection and publication bias, and also just be very inclusive of the literature that you're including. And if you can, recruit a colleague to help validate your screening and decisions to reduce error and bias in your systematic review. And as I have mentioned, there are different tools that can help you conduct a systematic review. So we use Satori in this systematic review because it was a reference manager and allowed us to have all our references in the one place. So it was easy to screen them and remove any duplicates. RevMan also provides the same tools, it's just a different software. There's also Epi Reviewer as a software that allows you to import all the references, and it also allows you to conduct your data extraction in it. However, you can get a free trial with it, but then you have to pay for it. So there are some barriers there. But RevMan and Satori, which are reference managers, and then you can do your data extraction in Excel, are free. And there's also organisations such as the Campbell Collaboration, as I discussed yesterday, and Cochrane, that publish systematic reviews, and they can provide step-by-step guidance on how to conduct systematic reviews and publish systematic reviews through themselves. So there are lots of different tools that can help you conduct your systematic reviews in education and social sciences more widely. And these are only a couple of examples. There are many more out there as well, so feel free to do some more research into that. So that is my presentation. I hope that was useful, going through the steps with a practical example of the systematic review to understand how you can implement these steps practically to conduct a systematic review, both in education and social sciences more generally, because it follows the same steps no matter what your topic or area is. So I'm more than happy, I know I've spoken a lot, so I'm more than happy to take any questions or points, or just silence if you're all like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of information. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, it is such kind of valuable sharing. And I'm sure it is taken from your experience in conducting systematic review research. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Erin gave a chance for you to ask a question. You may ask her directly by clicking the reaction, raising your hand, or maybe you can use chat box. Okay, Erin, if I can say that this method is really tight in processing of screening, right? So it started from step 2 or second step, that we should really finding the eligible studies by inclusion or exclusion, which one is include, which one includes, or which one excludes. Okay, right.
Yep.
And then the last one is also when we try to analyze the data or the study, we also should use, what is it, we should screen by looking at the title and also the abstract. Yep. So I think this is a very multiple screening. Yeah. That's why this method is also called as evidence of practice of evidence, because we should really be careful to provide our findings by selecting and also screening. Right. And also we need iterator. Okay, to avoid a bias or maybe to minimize the errors, right? Okay, so it is very challenging. Okay, yeah, please, everybody, are you interested? I'm sure yes, yeah.
I have questions, Warsi, actually.
Okay, yes.
Not actually, more than one, actually.
Yes.
Okay, can I?
Yes.
Okay. I am interested with your research, the one that you shared through the email about self-concept. Yeah, it's a very nice coincidence, because my research for my thesis or for my dissertations was also about self-concept. The topic was also about self-concept. That's why it popped something in my mind. I should ask Erin some questions, yeah, especially related with I don't know whether it relates to data extractions, or it also come earlier, yeah, related with the theory of self-concept here. Because to my understanding, if I'm not mistaken, the theory of self-concept was influenced by two main philosophical framework, yeah. First is cognitivism and behaviorism, yeah. So once I want to, when I collected the data or references, should also the philosophical foundations that influence the theory of self-concept should also be one of the considerations, okay? Because according to the steps, or what's it, data extractions steps, there's PICOs, populations, only interventions, only comparatives, outcomes, and the study design only, yeah, those are the things that need to be considered. So how about the philosophical foundations? That's the first questions. Okay.
Yeah, so the theoretical framework of that paper did drive the systematic review heavily. It was very heavily focused. So what we done was an introduction to literature review, and then we done a big section on theoretical framework and how that has kind of influenced studies to really drive different measures of statistics, self-concept that are used in studies. Then when we were synthesizing the studies, we then referred back to the theoretical framework. So if studies kind of made reference to it, or if their measures were aligned with what the theoretical framework said, then you can pull it that way. But equally, if a theory is driving this, if the theory is driving the type of studies you want to include in the systematic review, and their inclusion of theory is very important for the eligibility of studies to be included, then of course you can incorporate that into your inclusion criteria. It's what I said, the inclusion criteria of each systematic review will differ, and PICOs is a good way, a starting block to think, what do we need to include here, what is important. But equally, you can build around that if there are other things that are important to include as well. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Okay, yeah. You answered the question, Erin. Thank you very much. Actually, I still have one more questions, but I'll give a chance to other participants first. Yeah, Bu Siti Soeharsi.
Okay. Yeah. I would like to see the one who has raised her or his hand, but I think only you, Budina.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, I read in the chat. I would like to ask, can we add some stages?
Ivania.
Yeah, and Ivana as well.
Ivania and Husna Nadia. Okay. Yeah, Ivania asks you about the use of both education-specific databases and wider scope databases. Is it a must, or we could just pick one of them? That's the question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So as I said in the presentation, the databases that you choose for your systematic review will differ for each one. And as long as you can justify why you have chosen the databases that you have included in your systematic review, that's completely fine. So it's completely up to you what you decide to include. Usually, if you can be inclusive of the literature through the databases that you find, it's a positive of a systematic review. So that's why we included both education-specific databases, such as ERIC, where it's really just education studies that are included in that database, but also wider ranging ones such as Scopus, which will also pick up studies that are outside of the education field. So maybe social sciences more broadly, or psychology, things like that there, because a lot of research is interdisciplinary. So you have to kind of think sometimes outside the box of where studies might be located. So it's up to you, but sometimes the more inclusive you can be, the better for that reason.
Erin, you got basically a direct question from Pak Adolfina Krisipu, right? Pak Adolf, so sorry.
Ibu.
Oh,
Oh,
Ibu.
sorry.
It's Ibu, it's Ibu.
Ibu,
Dolphin
Punten.
Christine.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sorry for not knowing your hand. Trying to raise, yeah. Because only one who raised the hand, only Budina in my screen. Oke, ya silakan Bu.
Oke, baik Bu Siti, terima kasih banyak. Oke, Dr. Erin, thank you so much for your, what interesting explanation and based on your study. And there are some question I think, but it is related. But I will ask when something. Yes, when there is something in relation to that. I'm interested in what you say, prisma flow diagram, and also some tools that you use to, to screen the studies, yeah, from different databases, and at first, before you put these tools, I thought that you and your colleagues do self screening. So that's why, oh, it's too much, too many. But then you provide it, and I understand. And my question is about the Prisma. When you use the tool of Sotoro, when it is used in the level of diagram, it is on the record after duplicates, or when when you use that, because there are databases, yeah, there are databases, and when it is used to screen, to to segregate or something like that. And one more in relation to the protocol. Okay, when you use protocols and when do you use the Sotoro? After the result, after all smaller number you get from Sotoro, then you use the protocol, or how? Okay, I need elaboration of this. Thank you.
So can I just clarify, is your question in relation to Prisma flow diagram?
Yes.
When do you make that, or when do you put it together? Is that your question, or what's your question in relation to?
I'm actually in the level of, can you show the Prisma again, the diagram? Okay, yeah.
Bear with me. Here we go.
Yes, this. Yeah. Now you have all this. The total number is about 217.
Yeah.
Now that's after duplicates were removed. It means that you use the software here or on the next one.
Okay, so we use Sotoro to, once we have searched the literature, okay? So at the top here where it says RX Psych Info, Psych articles, okay? We import all the N numbers, okay? So we import 27, 18, 114 to Sotoro, okay? To have all the references, all the search results in one place. Okay, then what that means is that we have all the search results in one place, so we can then go through and include and exclude based on their title and abstract. Okay.
Okay. So it means you do, your colleagues and you and your colleagues do manually? I mean, to
Yeah.
extract it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you have to manually screen the results and extract the data yourself. Okay, no matter what you use, nothing does that for you. It's simply a organization tool. Is probably a good way to describe what RevMan and Satoro are. It's merely to have everything in one place. Then when you go to do your data extraction, that's then when you can take all the included studies that are in one place in Satoro, and then you can go to Excel and you can use your data extraction form to then say this study is included, and let's make a data extraction form for it. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it means that you use Excel beside the Zotero. I mean, after you put in Excel, then you put in Zotero, something like that, or the other way.
So Satoro simply keeps all your references in one place.
I see. Okay.
And that is all. Okay. So it's just the file, like the folder for all your studies. Then Excel is completely different. So we would make our data extraction form in Excel, and we just keep it as a Excel file. Okay, keep it on our computer in a file, and so it doesn't get imported anywhere. We just keep that as our reference point. Then when we go to synthesize our study, so when we go to write up our systematic review, it is that Excel file that has all the information in it. So Satoro was good to tell us what studies were provided from searching the literature, and then allowed us to say, let's include this one, let's exclude this one. And then once we have the total number that we have to extract data from, we can then move to Excel and keep Satoro in the background, but do nothing else with it.
Oh, okay, see. Then how about the protocol? Protocol is, I mean, I saw the protocol, something related to literature, this description or intervention. It's like the one that you do, or the one that you did in step 7, data extraction. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So the protocol is simply, you do the protocol very early in your systematic review, and just do the protocol as a plan. Okay.
Okay.
It's a plan for your systematic review, but usually we write the protocol when we have our research question, so we know what we're interested in looking at,
Okay.
and we also know what our search string is going to be, so we know how to search the literature, and maybe we have an idea of the databases that we're going to search. Okay, so when we have those few steps, then we can write the protocol, and that simply means you are stating the methods that you're going to use. Okay, so it simply means you're stating what your research question is, what is your search string, what databases are you going to search, and how are you going to manage it all? Okay, so how are you going to extract the data? And it's really just a plan and a tool of reference. So if you were to conduct a systematic review and you wrote your protocol, okay, and then you sent it to me, I should, from your protocol, be able to follow your steps that you've outlined and conduct the systematic review in the same way that you can do it, who's involved in the project.
So it means as a guidelines to do the systematic review.
Exactly.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm
no, okay, I'm done. Thank you. I'm finished. Thank you. This is my what is it? Something. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Erin.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ibu Vina. Yeah, because I see there are 2 questions more for you, Erin, but you still have not more than 5 minutes. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, the first one is, can we add some stages to writing systematic review? Some stages.
I've never had to add any stages to writing a systematic review. Usually all those steps are more than enough. If there's things that you think you need to add on, then of course, as long as you're transparent in what you've done. But equally, don't create more work for yourself, I would say.
Okay, yeah. So I think you never try to simplify the stages, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but another one said that can we simplify it because seems to Winda so many stages in this kind of research.
Yeah. I mean, as I said in the presentation, some stages such as data extraction and evaluating the overall quality of studies can be brought together because you're going to evaluate studies as you're reading them and extracting the data. So I've simply set them out as separate steps, but they can be done at the same time, if that makes sense. As well as when you are putting together your search string, at the same time, you can start to be thinking about what databases are you going to be searching. And again, you can write up your data extraction form when you are clear about the PICOs that you're interested in. So, you can do these things kind of merging together, but they're still separate steps, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I think it is possible for us to not to simplify, but I think what you have presented just want to show the stages in more detailed and comprehensive, right? But basically, there are
Exactly.
some stages we can do it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's just all these stages are part of the systematic review process. So you need to understand each stage to understand how to conduct a systematic review. But that's not to say that you can't do things like concurrently, that they come together. I've just presented it that way so you understand you need a search string. You need databases to search rather than saying, oh, just put it all together and good luck. So
yeah, Erin, somebody gives you an idea whether this is suitable for systematic review. The title, do online instructional practices significantly impact teacher educators? Okay, what do you think about this title or this idea?
yeah, that sounds good.
Good for, okay. So Miss D, you can directly conduct the research using systematic review because your idea is suitable for this kind of method, right? Okay. And the last one, yeah, I think because 4 minutes remains. It's better Dr. Erin demonstrates the use of device. Oh, Zotero and Excel when she is screening the articles. Okay, it takes not only 2 hours, I think 1 week, yeah?
Correct, Borsi.
Right?
There's no enough, yeah, no enough time for
Okay,
that.
yeah, next time, yeah. I think this is for PLE, next job. Giving a
Next
workshop.
project for Erin, workshop.
Okay, or for Erin again. Okay. Well, Ibu Dina, I think we just still 3 minutes.
I still have one more question. A very
Okay.
okay. Because the idea comes from my research actually. Yeah, I just thought that systematic review should had been a part of my study, yeah, actually, because I received a comments from my supervisor at that time. Why then self-concept? Yeah, because the theory of self-concept is crystallized, which means that it doesn't yield more new insight, yeah, to readers. At that time, this was the comment from my supervisor. Because my research was about the sub-concept of English pre-service teachers. Yeah, so when I search for the theories, it's the theory of sub-concept doesn't shoot the needs or the goals of my study, because the purpose is to see how the English pre-service teachers see themselves and how their perceptions of their own ability in teaching relates or really what's it in line with their teaching performance at that time. Yeah, so I actually systematic review should had been my preliminary study. So how about what do you think, Erin? Yeah, should systematic review stand as a single study, or can it also be a part of, for example, my study? Yeah, my study at the time was a case study.
Yeah, no, it can be both. So for example, when I was conducting my PhD, I conducted a systematic review as part of my literature review. Okay, so it had nothing to do with the actual study that I was doing. It was simply part of my first chapter of the literature review. But other people can conduct a systematic review and a meta-analysis, and that's a whole PhD for them. So it can be like part of a study, or it can be a standalone thing.
Okay.
So if it's part of a bigger project, such as a thesis or a dissertation, it can be a component, but equally it has the ability to stand alone.
Okay. Thank you very much, Erin, for the answer. One more question, but actually it's not my questions, it's the participants' questions.
Oh yeah, really?
Can you share the PowerPoint with the participants? It's a request, actually.
Of course, that's fine.
Okay, so Erin will share the PowerPoint to all of you, guys.
Okay, don't worry, be happy. Thank you, Erin.
You're welcome.
Okay, my last simple sentence wrapping your elaboration from yesterday until today, that this method is defined as a review using a systematic method to summarize evidence on question with a detailed and comprehensive plan of study. Am I right, Erin?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. And for you, the participants and ladies and gentlemen, we got what is it? A valuable inspiration and also experience discussing with Erin. And because this is perhaps for some of us still new, but I think this is a very interesting and challenging. Okay, so Bu Fina, keep fighting. I think you are really wants to start conducting your research using this method, ya, Ibu Fina. Okay.
Right, Bu Siti. It's good. Yeah.
Also for other students, okay, it's time for you to read more and more, because the basic skill for us for this method is reading, right? Reading and selecting. Okay, selecting reading or material or text or study. Okay, Ibu Dina, do you have a close statement?
A close statement probably will come from the head of international office.
Okay.
Would you like to give a close statement or greeting to Erin?
Okay, please, Pak Udi, I invite you to give a close statement to end this session for first series.
It's getting even darker. So, Erin, thank you very much.
Oh my God.
I know this is not the last session for you. There will be another sessions, which means I will invite you in the future for our next programs. Thank you very much. Hope everyone learned a lot from Erin about systematic review. I know this is quite complicated, but once you start, you will find the enjoyment of doing the systematic review research. Everything is clear already. Steps, stages, everything has been well discussed and explained by Erin. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Bu Arsi, and everyone. Bu Dina, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you
so much,
Pak Udi.
Ibu Siti
Thank you, everyone. Yes, thank you, Erin, and also
thank you.
Students. Okay, don't forget to come back again to the second series of short course. Okay, I think Bu Dina will inform the date for the next series.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Bu Siti Suharsi. Yeah. Firstly, don't forget to follow our international office of Tirtayasa social media. Nugi, could you please share? Okay. And the second series will be on the 16th with Dr. Aisling Oboil, and the third.
Bu Dina, sorry interrupt you. Okay, I think I want you to share your feelings of joining today's together. Okay, you can put you can say in one word or in one emoticon, okay, please you can write your feeling in the chat box. Okay, while Budina inform another series. Please, Budina.
Yeah. The second series will be on the 16th of March, and the third will be on 17th. So make sure that you don't miss them, okay? And follow us on our social media, International Office of Universitas, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and what else? Nugi. Yeah, I guess that's all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Budina.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we can end our session. Thank you, everyone. See you again in the next series. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you,
Erin.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Erin, thank you once again.
Thank you, Yudi.
Well done.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Erin. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Bu Arsi. Thank you, Pak Eko, everyone.
Terima kasih Bu Arsi, terima kasih banyak Dr.
Yeah, thank
Dina,
you.
Dr.
Tapi,
Udin.
Terima kasih
Thank you.
banyak. Thank you
Masih,
very
Bu Adolfina.
much.